So that's why I'm really happy to have Joanna here, because Joanna's our favorite professional poker player. She's been a bartender at Doc Hollidays for 25 years. How long have you been a poker player?
13 years.
13 years, and she just returned from the World Series of Poker. She was in the earthquake, and the chandeliers are shaking and everything. So please give a warm welcome to Joanna Holliday. You want to put that on?
Yes. Thanks, Kevin. So Kevin asked me to speak here today about poker. Even the most hardcore poker players don't really know the history of poker. So for my purposes, I'm going to talk about the history of poker where it relates to money. This started in around the 17 and 1800s with riverboat gambling. And that it was on the Mississippi River and places nearby, and that's where it started. And then the people that were on the riverboats also were prospecting for gold, and they started to travel west. The members of the Algonquin Round Table, they did play every Saturday night. And it was a thing that they would start on a Saturday night, and sometimes it would go until Monday morning. This has happened to me several times, that I've played poker tournaments that have lasted over 22 hours, where it started at 11 in the morning and then ended the next day at 10 in the morning. So I understand these marathon sessions. They had a choice though. They could get up and leave. I was in a tournament where you were forced to stay at the table until somebody accumulates all the chips. So there's a difference between playing cash games, which you also call ring games, and playing tournament poker. Because tournament poker, once you're eliminated, you're out. So around in the 1920s, which was sort of an era of frivolity, when the Depression came around, poker sort of petered out a little bit, and then over time the popularity stayed very stagnant. And the advent of poker in Las Vegas in the 1970s was one of the booms, and then there was the whole cam and televised poker, which allowed you to see the players' cards while they were playing poker on television. And then after that, the real poker boom was in 2003 when Chris Moneymaker qualified for a $10,000 buy-in. I think it was $38. It was a $38 satellite, and he won his seat into the $10,000 main event, and he wound up winning the main event. So he was an ordinary Joe, an accountant, and he was your everyday guy. That was the beginning of the poker boom, and anybody could log on onto the internet and play poker on the internet. My history with regards to poker starts in 1994 when I was hired as a bartender at Doc Hollidays in the East Village, which is right on Tompkins Park. The owners of the bar, they had met at the Mayfair Club, which was an underground card room on 26th Street in the basement of the Stanford Hotel. There was actually another location before that, but this was the location that they were playing in at the time when I started working there. It originally was a backgammon and bridge club, and then it eventually known as the premier poker club in New York City. Recently we had Dave McWater on the podcast. Those of you that know and don't know, Kevin and I have a podcast where we talk about society and culture in New York City, and Dave, the owner of Doc Hollidays, came on the podcast, and we said, well, how did the name Doc Hollidays come about? And he said, well, the guy at the time that was my partner said, well, you just won a bunch of money playing poker at the Mayfair Club. Who's a country poker player? And he said, Doc Holliday. He said, well, there's your name. And so that is the name of the bar that has now been there for 25 years. And that's how Doc Hollidays was born. So that's my first connection to poker. The Mayfair Club had what have now become some of the best poker players in the world, including Steve Zolotow, who is another owner at Doc Hollidays, and Dan Harrington, who wrote the book on tournament poker. Actually, 3 books on tournament poker. And then I wound up meeting him last year and having dinner with him, and he was a really cool guy. Last year, when I was in Vegas and I met him, I said, well, what advice do you have? You're, a super successful poker player. He said, well, any money that you win, invest it. That's what he said. He said, he couldn't give me any poker advice or anything. He just said, whatever money you win, invest it. And that's what he did. He invested in real estate, and he's been able to have a very nice life with the money that he invested. The Mayfair Club was actually the basis of the underground poker club that was in the movie Rounders. It was called the Chesterfield Club, and it was an underground poker club, and the characters in the movie Rounders were based on the Mayfair Club. Now, from time to time, because I was bartending at Doc Hollidays, they would have a waitress that called in sick at the Mayfair Club. So a couple of times I was asked to waitress there, and I had no connection to the poker world. I had no interest in poker, and they had a kitchen. You could get food and cocktails and stuff like that. So I was waitressing in this premier underground poker club in 1994 with no interest in cards, and I didn't even know basic poker hands. A couple of times I went with Dave and Z to Atlantic City, and they would talk about questionable stuff, illegal money swaps and degenerate gamblers and robberies and held at gunpoint and all this crazy stuff. And I was intrigued by it, but the cards, I never had like an interest in games or game theory or chess or backgammon or anything like that. I think we played gin rummy and stuff like that. My grandmother, though, she was a card player. She had a bridge table and she used to play bridge. So I sort of have it in my genes. So I was never really interested in card playing until one day I was watching World Series of Poker on TV, and it was the Chris Moneymaker World Series from 2003. This was 2006. And I was watching it, and I was watching it with a friend of mine, and he said, you'd be a really good poker player. And I said, well, why do you think that? He said, well, you're good at reading people, you're competitive, you like to win, just all these things that are a part of me really made sense when I stopped and thought about it. So I decided I'm going to learn how to play poker. And so what I did was I started to play for play money on the internet. At the time, the internet was still available. It hadn't been banned in New York City. But you could play for play money, and I would start to play for play money, and I was winning tournaments. And then I started to play $2.20 tournaments on PokerStars. And the first tournament I played, I won, and it was $180 for first place for a $2.20 tournament. And so after winning that, I was like, oh, I must be good at this. So I played online for about 6 months, and it was very successful. I had a lot of wins. I was very natural at it. And then I said, well, it's time to go to Atlantic City. It's only a 2.5-hour bus away, so I can get on Atlantic City. And I started going to Atlantic City. So I started to play at the Showboat Casino, which is it's not there anymore. But it was $65 tournaments. I was right on the boardwalk, and as for a $65 tournament, I came in 4th place in 2006, and it was $1,100 for a $65 buy-in. And I'll never forget the hand. And people say to me, how is it that you remember the hand? And I said, I don't know. I remember some crazy stuff. But I had pocket queens, which in poker is a huge hand. And the guy said to me, I went all in, and the guy said to me, I know you have me beat, but I'm going to call anyways. And he called with ace jack, which you want in this situation, and he hit an ace, and I busted the tournament. So whenever somebody says to you, I know that you have me beat, it kind of makes me like have a weird omen feeling that he's going to suck out, because he only had 3 cards he could hit, and he hit one of them. So then I started playing at the Taj Mahal, which it was called the Midnight Madness Tournament, and it started at midnight and it ended at about 6 in the morning. And the Taj Mahal was a very rough room. There was knife fights outside. There was like brawls every time you went there. It was a very rough room, and very few females. I'll get to the part about very few females because that still dominates today. So after about 10 years of playing poker, which included some trips to Las Vegas where I ran really far in some big field events, I was in a $1,500 tournament where I finished like 100 and something for $4,000, and first place was $900,000. So if you're playing a poker tournament, you can go through, 2,000 players, play perfectly, play really well, and then make all your right decisions and then have a bad result. So in this particular tournament, I had ace queen, a guy called me with ace 10, and he had a 10, and that's the end of my tournament. If my hand holds up there, who knows? Maybe I make $900,000. It could be one hand that changes everything. So after a couple of World Series of Poker cashes, I did decide that I wanted to play the $10,000 main event. And I thought, well, how can I play the $10,000 main event? I don't have $10,000. You're not supposed to invest more than 10% of your bankroll, which I decided to take backers, and I accumulated about anywhere between $50 and $1,000 from a series of like 30-something people, most of people related to Doc Hollidays, and I started to play the World Series of Poker 4 years ago. Now, besides the poker and the strategy, the math of it all, you have to worry about all these other things, like, is the room cold? Can you sleep at night? Is there nutritional food available? Like, there's all these other things. Are the chairs uncomfortable? Do you have to bring a cushion with you? Is there water? Can you get water when you need it? So there's all these other conditions that factor in to playing a poker tournament on top of just the math and the cards and playing the cards. There's all these other conditions. Just to give you an example, and I just had this one down. The stats aren't out on the 2019 poker tournament, but the numbers by 2015, there were 68 events, 77,290 total entrants, 30,000 different decks of cards, 803 individual chips, and 500 poker tables. So if you look back to 1983, there were 104 players in the main event, and this year there were almost 9,000. The prize in 1983 was some like trophy and like a little rinky-dink thing, I don't know. This year, first place was $10 million. So this is how much the game has grown. But the one thing that has not changed, and which seems staggering to me, is that only 4% of the main event field are female. So when you get to like day 2 or day 3 of the main event, there's like 10 women left. I mean, which is very strange. So you're in a sea of men, and they're very oblivious because they're in their own worlds. Like they don't even notice that you're there. Like you're very invisible in this world. But the female thing is very, very, very. I feel like there should be more females in the game, and I feel that they should do more to bring more females into the game because they're an untapped market of players that don't know how to play, and you always want inexperienced players, and they should be more welcoming and social at the table. They don't even talk to you. So the social aspect of the game has really dissipated. There are people with the hoodies on, with the sunglasses on, with the headphones on, that are only interested in what they call game theory optimal, which is the math of it. And they could be online clicking 15 different tournaments, and they're just clicking, and it's clicking, and it's clicking. So when they're sitting at a table, even with people there, they're just auto-clicking. They might as well be on the internet. So the social aspect really isn't there. So I guess I'll open it to questions. I just got back from Vegas. I'm a little delirious. I'm a little out of it. I was playing cards for 13 days. 3 of them were in the main event. And, I didn't cash in anything. I made good decisions. I slept well. I ate well. I did everything right, but things just didn't happen because when there's 9,000 players, everything has to line up. Like you have to have cards when somebody else has to have cards. Everything has to line up, and so luck is really important. So I don't know if I could have been better prepared for this if I hadn't been playing poker for 13 days, but I'll open it to you guys if you have any questions. Yes, Kevin.
Best poker story, the funniest or most thing you'll never forget about the poker table?
Oh, I mean, there's a couple different things. Being a female definitely changes the dynamic. I mean, the thing that just popped into my mind was there was a guy that I was playing next to that basically told me to fold my hand. I mean, he was like, "You're beat. You need to fold." Like, he was telling me to fold my hand only because I was an attractive female sitting next to him and he wanted to flirt with me. That's the only reason. He would have never done it for a male. So I don't know. I mean, there's been some. I mean, that's just something that popped into my head, but there's definitely lots of stories. I mean, I've been bullied at the table, and definitely. Or people say, what are you doing here? Like, why are you here? Oh, the one thing that's really interesting is that whoever I'm sitting next to, they think that's my partner. Like, if you're sitting next to me at the poker table, they're like, "Oh, I thought you guys were like married or boyfriend and girlfriend." Just because there's no way that a single female could have come to play poker in Atlantic City by herself. No, I had to have come with my boyfriend or my husband, which that I get a lot. Oh, I just assumed you were with him. Even in a poker tournament where the seating is random, it's like, how stupid are you? Yeah, so that's pretty crazy. Francine, I know you had questions. You wrote some down.
Well, one of the questions I got was like, what do you do to prepare? Do you have a rigorous thing with your
So there was actually a player that finished third this year in the main event who I remember playing with in 2013. I was playing a $1,500 buy-in. I actually finished really deep. I was talking about that one event where I had ace queen and the guy had ace 10, and I finished really deep in this tournament. I remember certain things, but this guy was reading this book, and it was called The Mental Game of Poker by Jared Tendler, and that book is the single most important book. It's about the mental aspects of the game and how you continue to play after you're sucked out on, after there's a bad beat. For me, you can learn all the math, you can learn all the technical stuff, but you see people that lose a hand and then all of a sudden they just spew chips. They lose one hand and then their mental capacity for focusing is just out the window. They call it going on tilt, and they lose one hand and then all of a sudden, they might even have a massive amount of chips, and mentally they just lose it and then they just lose all their chips. So I would just say focusing on every hand as one hand and then moving on to the next hand. No matter what, if he hit a 1 out, or if you had a 99% chance and he hit that one card, you still have to pick yourself up and move on to the next hand. So I would say, I do a lot of, I'd say like eating really well, eating really healthily. When I'm in Vegas, I usually go to the hot tub in the morning to sort of relax and just focus on cards. I'm just going to focus on cards. When you get to the point that you've been playing for 13 years, the technical aspects are the technical aspects, right? You're not going to, there are little things that become trendy in the poker world, certain mathematical things that people say, oh, you need to do it this way or you need to do it that way. They're definitely trends, but once you learn the skills, then I feel that all this other stuff is really important. Getting a good night's sleep, not drinking alcohol, doing exercise, just all these other things. And just focusing on the one hand as it happens and then getting to the next hand and not focusing on what just happened and letting it get into your brain, because you'll see it. You'll see it, like if you watch it on TV, you'll see it. It gets into people's brains and it just eats away at it. If you have to get up and walk away from the table and do like a lap around the terminal, the convention center, then do a lap around the convention center, if that's going to set you straight. So I'd say mentally is the most important thing, and also just feeling confident and acting confident and not letting other people intimidate you just because they're a pro or just because they're acting like they've got millions in tournament wins. It doesn't matter. Everybody is equal, and it's one of the sports, and I do call it a sport because it is a marathon, where any race, any religion, any gender that's over 21 can compete against each other. So it really is an equal footing, although there's been some things that have happened in the poker world, like rebuys Like if you bust the tournament, you can rebuy, which didn't used to be the case. Like if you're in the main event and you bust the main event, you're out. There's other smaller tournaments where if you bust, you can re-enter. So that means people with deeper pockets have a better chance because they can refuel. So I really like, bust out tournaments where you bust out, you're out. To me, it's survival, and if you have the opportunity to rebuy, that changes the whole dynamic, and that makes it an economic issue as well. Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Gregg.
So my understanding, though, out of 9,000 plus contestants, you performed very well. What was that number, and how do we explain for that accomplishment?
Yeah, so it's a 10-day tournament, and at the end of every day, you bag your chips. So whatever chips you have left at the end of the day, they go into a bag with your name on it, and then you get your table assignment for the next day. When you come back to day 2 in the main event, half the field is gone. So if it's 9,000 to start, this year it was like 8,700 players. If you come back to day 2, about half the field is gone. When I was bagging chips, but I wasn't bagging a lot of chips. I was surviving. And, there was one guy that was in this event that was down to 4,000 in chips, I think on day 1 or 2, which is like nothing. It's like a chip, 1 chip, 2 chips, whatever. And he came back, and at one point he had 700,000 in chips. So the point is never to give up. Like you could be down to 3 big blinds or 1 chip or whatever you want to, but one hand you double up or one hand you triple up, and then all of a sudden you just go on a run, and all of a sudden you have chips. So you can't give up. So when you come back to day 3 with less chips than day 2, which is what happened to me, you wait for a moment when you have a big hand, when you're in a position to accumulate more chips, and then you make your move. But you have to play smarter when you have less chips. When you have more chips, you can push more people around. So I guess at the point that I busted, it was late on day 3. It was around 6 o'clock in the evening. And I had 12 big blinds, which mathematically means that you have to go, you have to pick a hand. You need more chips, or you're going to just be blind. Your money's going to go in the antes, and you're just going to fizzle out without even doing anything. So I went in with pocket 3s against Jack Queen, which is, I don't really want to talk about the technical aspects, but it's basically a classic race situation. And on the flop, I was good. On the turn, I was good. And on the river, he had gone runner to flush. So he had 1 heart in his hand, and there were 4 hearts on the community board, and he made a flush on the river. So I didn't even see it when it happened. I was like, hold on a minute, and then I was out. At that point, there were 1,990 players left out of 8,700 players. So, I mean, you make the money when you get to the top 15%. I was close. But all these things have to line up. If he doesn't hit his, if a heart doesn't fall in the river, then I double up there, and who knows what happens. It's just, everything is timing. Somebody else having a hand, what position you are at the table. If people are, if you're on a money bubble, you're about to get paid, right? So at midnight on day 3, everybody's about to make their money back plus a small profit. So some players might take advantage of that. Oh, I'm going to push this person around because they don't want to bust, because they want to make their money back plus a little profit. So there's things like playing the money bubble. How do you play the money bubble? Do you just want to survive? Do you just want to min cash? Can you take advantage of that? So a lot of pros will push around players that just want to min cash. They want their $10,000 plus $5,000 back. And if it's, if they just have to sit there and not play a hand, they're going to sit there and not play a hand just so they make money. There's people that get up and go to the bathroom for an hour, just so that they don't play a hand and bust the tournament. So there's a lot of different factors. It's really mind-blowing actually thinking about all the different things that have to go right in a tournament for somebody to win first. It's really mind-blowing. Anyone else?
How much fame is social for you Russians? That's what we see on TV.
Yeah. So, like, if you watch the main event on television, the ones that are at the feature tables, they're mic'd. So they know that they're on television, so they might be more social than they would be if they weren't on camera and on ESPN. You know, they're performing a little bit, and they know they might even bluff just so that it's on TV. It might even change the play of some players. Yeah. And I would say that it just depends on the table. You might have somebody that's really social that just wants to talk something other than poker. They just want to talk about, you know, Vegas, or where to go get the best buffet in Las Vegas. You know, there's people that want to be social at the table. I would say that the younger, like the 20-somethings are the ones that are with the headphones on and really just playing the numbers and auto-clicking. If you get the older 50-somethings, they tend to be more social. Women, if you play like a ladies event, they tend to be more social and congratulatory almost. Like they're almost supportive. It's very strange. Although that's my experience, and other people have said, no, women are the worst, you know. So a lot of it depends on table, and, you know, if you have, 500 different poker tables, that's a luck of the draw too. Like you could get a table where every single person at the table is a professional poker player, right? And you're the only one that has a regular job that's just doing this on the side. You know, my day 2 last year, every single person at my day 2 table was a professional poker player with millions in tournament wins. Does that bother me? No, it doesn't bother me. But that's information that I have that's pertinent to how I'll play. Does the recreational player have less chips than me? Maybe I can pick on the other recreational player. Is this guy German? You know, is he a German player? Because German players are way more aggressive and play a wider range of hands. So there's where are they from? That's like a big thing. Where are they from? The European players play differently than American players. So there's a lot of different factors, but that's basically like your mind is just, there's so much stuff going around in your brain other than the cards. Who is the player? What position are you at the table? What is their chip stack? Can they bust you? You know, just, do they have more chips than you? Do you want to get involved in a pot where that person can eliminate you? No, maybe you just want to get involved with the small stack, you know? So it's a host of different things, and you really have to think and consider, where you are, and, you know, where you are in the tournament, if you're almost in the money, like all these different things. Anyone else? Most tournaments, it's usually every couple hours. You get a 15 or 20 minute break. It depends. And then you usually get a dinner break. So it's usually 45 minutes to an hour and a half is the dinner break, depending on what day or where you're playing. Which is another thing, if you're a guy and you're playing the main event on a day where there's 4,000 other players, the lines for the bathroom are so long that you might not be back in your seat by the time it starts again. So for me, I'm playing the main event. I never have a line. That's one place I never have a line. But you go and there's guys that are just like, they'll leave early so that they can get to the bathroom so they can not miss a hand. So that's another thing. And then where do you eat during your break? And how much time do you have? Can you leave the casino? Can you go to another hotel? Because if you're at your hotel, you only have, like at the Rio, where the thing is, there's only, a handful of places, and they're all going to have a line. So do you really want to spend your break waiting online for the bathroom or waiting online for food? I usually leave the Rio. I usually take a car to the Strip, and I get something on the Strip and take a car back, because it's an hour and a half. So it takes me like 20 minutes and 20 minutes, and then I can eat in between. So yeah, that's another factor. So that's another thing, is that like I have a regular job, so I don't have the luxury of playing all the time. And for me, that I'm just a tournament player. I don't play cash games, which are, you can go to underground cash games in New York City where people are playing cards, just for cash money, but they're not tournaments, which is it's like apples and oranges. So for me, I have to get on a bus and go to Atlantic City, which is a 2.5-hour trip. So generally what I do is I'll leave on a Tuesday, I'll play on a Wednesday, and then return on a Thursday, and then every once in a while I'll make it a longer trip. So no, I don't get to play as much as these people that are playing in the main event. They probably play hundreds of tournaments a year, and I'm lucky if I play 12 tournaments a year. 1 year I was able to play about 30 tournaments, but I was going like every other week to Atlantic City, and that was a long time ago. I was younger. So yeah, you have to worry about the travel aspect of it. If you're on a bus, then it takes you 4 hours from door to door. Do you really want to get off and play right away? Like, there's all these different factors. So no, I don't get to play as much as everyone else. And sometimes playing a lot is really helpful, but then sometimes playing a lot, people burn out. So I do feel fresh sometimes. Like you go to the, Vegas, and there's people that have been there the whole summer. Like the entire summer. Like, do you know how many bad beats they've had? Like, they're exhausted, and you can see it on their face, and they're just mentally like drained. And here I am, this is the second tournament I've played all summer, and I'm fresh and I'm dressed up and I'm, so in some ways it's an advantage that you're not burnt out and you haven't seen like all these things haven't happened to you. People are just like, oh, you hear people on break talking about their bad beat stories, like, oh, and then this guy hit his one out, or, that's not mental stability. Like that, if you go back to the mental aspects of it, what is talking about the bad beat going to do for you? Nothing. Everyone knows the end of the story. You lost the hand, like we know the punchline. We know it, so why would you talk about your bad beat story, So yeah, I wish I could play more, but in some ways maybe it's not. I don't know. But you could do simulations. You could do, free poker. You could do like WPT. I could go to New Jersey and play online, but like that's not. If I go to New Jersey, I'm playing live, right? So yeah. I mean, I wish I could play more, but it's really mentally draining. Like after day 2 of the main event, I could barely get out of bed. Like barely get out of bed for like 12 hours of play. I had that day off, and I like literally just could not get out of bed till like 2 in the afternoon, I think. I mean, I was just so physically, mentally just drained. Can you imagine playing? That's another thing. Like people in the main event, they've played for 10 days, 12 hours a day, 13 hours a day. Like, how can you make the right decisions? Are you sleeping? Did you have to book, your family's airfare? Did you sleep at all? All these things. Did you come out to Vegas? Do you have belongings with you? Do you have enough clothes? Did you have to go shopping? Did you have to call, all these things that factor in, when you get to the end of it, like how many things have happened? How exhausted are you? You see people, they're so tired. They're just like, I'm done. But you're still competing. What are you going to do, right?
The whole series and other tournaments are staying, recording,
Are the World Series recording hands? They can't possibly, because they'd have to have chip readers in the cards to do that. They can't. No, they can't. I mean, maybe in the future they could, but no. No, because there's no whole cans. You can't see the whole cards. You can't see the whole cards unless you're at like a feature table with a whole can that reads your cards. So if you look on ESPN, you have to put your cards face down into the camera to read them. So there's only like 3 tables that are reading cards like that. So yeah, you can't really, I don't think. Anyone else?
Thanks, Joe.
All right.